Hi, everyone. This is Rick Fulner, and you're watching Brave Words in association with Sonic Perspectives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview of Brave Words in association with Sonic Perspectives. I'm Rodrigo, and my guest today is Rick Fellner, author of the book Stars Don't Carry Their Own Baggage. Rick, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, let me start by reading this straight from the back of the book just to provide context, and then you can comment.
Okay.
The book is the story of up and coming 80s rock band Cherry Thieves. But this isn't your typical rock and roll origin story. This is the early days of the band through the eyes of their tour manager. Get the inside scoop, hear the untold stories, and find out if Cherry Thieves can survive their first world tour and each other.
That's the main part right there.
Yeah. So tell me about this. I mean, how far ahead were you in your career as a tour manager when you thought, well, maybe I should start making notes because there are lots of crazy stories to tell?
Well, actually, I just wrote it during COVID. In
Mm,
2020, I came back from Europe with Dream Theater. We were there for January and February of 2020. We came back at the very end of February, and then that's when everything shut down and everything, just went to hell basically.
yeah,
The music business shut down completely. It was a sad time for a lot of people, and so I had no work. I'm a workaholic. I love to work. I mean, you can kind of see some of my albums in the background. I'm never stopped working. I mean, I go from one tour to the next,
mhm,
I just I love doing what I do. And anyways, so I was pacing the floors back and forth, going crazy, because I had nothing to do. And my
yeah,
wife was like, "You got to do something, Rick. You can't just pace the floors all day."
yeah,
So, anyways, I started just fooling around my computer and started making some notes for a book. And so what I did is I actually printed out my own resume because I couldn't remember all the bands I worked with because it's been 38 different bands over the last 40 years.
mm,
So I printed it all out, and then I just started like the first band I ever worked with. I just sat there and just thought about nothing but that band all day long, just focused on that. And I'm trying to remember 40 years ago. I'm
yeah.
an old guy. It's not that easy. So, anyways, I went through the whole list. It took me a couple weeks. Some artists, super easy, kind of boring, nothing happened. Others, lots of drama, lots of stuff going.
Right,
And once
right,
you start remembering it, it all, you know, and then when you're sleeping, it all comes to your mind too. It's, once it's in your head, it just, all the stories just start pouring out. I had a notebook next to my bed. I'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and just scribble down a couple words so I'd remember when I woke up the next morning.
right.
And so I just went through and I wrote out all these stories. And I had like 75, 80 different paragraphs, small little ideas, stories,
Right.
things that actually happened. So everything in the book actually has happened during my career. None of it's made up. It's all true.
Right.
The only
Well,
thing it's not true is Cherry Thieves. By the way, I'm wearing my Cherry Thieves t-shirt.
oh, good stuff. We
I
have the
just had,
logo right here. Yeah.
yeah, I saw that. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's a make-believe band, which naming a band is really hard. That was harder than writing the book. I must have changed the band name 5 or 6 times in the book. Actually, I started highlighting it in red because I knew I'd
Right.
have to go back and change them, But
Right.
I'd get a band name and I would send it to friends and family and say, "What do you think of this band name?" And like, one person liked it, then everybody else hated it, that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
anyways, but I probably came up with 30 band names, and you would not believe how many are already taken. I mean,
Jeez.
things, like, I try to think of something, Black Computer, for a band name. And I'd look it
That
up
one
and
exists?
there's already a band called Black Computer. I'm like, what? you know,
Crazy.
yeah. So, I'm just checking them off every day,
Right.
another name. I come up with something really good I'm really excited about. I look for it, taken. It's like,
Yeah.
so anyways, I like the word thieves. So I just kept trying different words with, to go with it. And Cherry Thieves, I thought for sure would be taken by some 80s band because of the different meaning of, and
Yeah.
so I was shocked that it wasn't taken. I actually emailed a couple of my computer friends and said, hey, do your thing and try to find something about Cherry Thieves. And they both came back and said, there's nothing about Cherry Thieves. It doesn't exist. And I'm like, excellent, you know.
Yeah.
So
What I wonder what they would sound like if there was actually a band called Cherry Thieves. Have you thought of that about that as well, or just the name?
no, actually I had that in my mind. They're kind of like um, if you look at the
Song
in
titles.
the book, the song titles, like
Yeah.
some of them are copy tunes. Okay. And
Uh,
like, you know, so in my mind, it was kind of like an Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses, Rolling Stones, more, gritty kind of band than a
got it.
poppy band. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I had in my mind, you know.
Right. Right.
And
And yeah.
go ahead.
No, and reading the book, I thought some of the stories had even a Spinal Tap element to them. But then you read the news about what's happening with Motley Crue, for example, right now, and you think, oh yeah, that might have really happened, you know?
Yeah.
So what's your take on this Motley Crue fiasco thing that's going on? I mean, if anything, that would be a common thing in a regular band, no, like fighting for rights and
Oh,
whatnot.
that goes on every band. I don't know a band that it doesn't go on with. I mean,
Right.
they're all fighting for the same dollar and fighting for the same thing.
Yeah.
But I know Mick Mars. I don't know the rest of the guys, so
Mhm.
it's hard for me to be, you know,
Yeah. Partial to one side
yeah,
or
partial to
yeah.
one side. And you know what we read and what we hear isn't always the whole story. That's
Yeah.
just somebody's opinion or someone's take on the story. So, it's hard to decide, but you know what? They'll all work it out. The lawyers will make all their money that they can, and then they'll finally agree on
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's sad that that stuff happens. But you know what? Motley Crue loves attention. So all of this could just be for attention and none of it's real, you know?
It could be. Could be. Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah. Yeah. And well, you said it yourself. You worked with 38 different bands in your career. Do you think people will eventually figure out who you're talking about in some of those stories in the book, or not really?
Maybe some close friends that I, were drinking
Mm,
with and said, "Yeah, you're not gonna believe this,"
mm,
But the guy who lives down the street, he has no idea, even what bands I worked with. But there are some stories that you might be able to figure out.
right.
There's a story in there that was actually in the Dream Theater book that
Mm.
was came out a few years ago. So anybody who's a Dream Theater fan would say, "Oh, I've read this story before."
Right.
But
Right.
it's a good
Yeah.
story. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, actually, people have been emailing me saying, "Hey, who was this?" and "Hey, who was that?" That I'm like, I'm not telling you. And if it's something
Yeah.
simple, I'll tell them. But if it's like, who was the guy with the underage girl? I'm like, I'm not telling you.
Yeah.
I mean,
That one in Germany, right? That the guy,
yeah, exactly.
the father of the girl was coming up the hotel to
Oh, the police,
check on
everything.
her. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually happened. It was, I
Mhm.
was a little nervous, but we got by. But
Right.
you know, people wanted people always ask. They never asked me about the dead body. You know, which I thought was a really good story, but when
Yeah.
you just brought it up, they always ask about, tell
Yeah.
me about the underage girls. Like, what? Like to me, that was just like you know, a small
Yeah.
little story. The dead body to me was like I thought that was
Huge.
more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. And yeah. And in the beginning of the book, the first singer of the Cherry Thieves leaves the band right when, they were ready to make it big. Did you see a lot of that in your career? I mean, members that freaked out and left on the verge of success, or
not a lot. And that actually happened
Mhm.
in a band that it was a new band that just came out, right? And I knew their manager, so he hired me, to work with them. Because I
Mhm.
don't really work with a lot of new bands because, not because I don't like them, but because they just can't afford me. New
Right.
bands, they have their brother be the tour manager or,
Yeah.
their cousin or somebody who will work for free.
Yeah.
You got to drive the van, and you got to do sound, and you got to do merch, and you got to,
Yeah.
you know. Well, when you're a new band, I have lots of, I know lots of people, that have new bands right now. They're just struggling. It's hard, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're starting GoFundMe pages. They're doing, a lot of things just to raise money so that they can tour because it's so expensive. Gas is expensive.
Yeah.
Renting vans or trucks is super expensive, and so it's hard.
Yeah.
I feel bad for new bands right now. It's a rough time.
It is.
But
Yeah.
to get back to your question, so yes, that definitely happened. But a lot of times people will do, I've worked with bands, they'll do like one tour and there'll be one guy, like a bass player or guitar player, whoever, that just doesn't like touring. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It doesn't
Yeah.
just doesn't want to do it because it wasn't what they thought it would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when the reality of it all sinks in, they kind of like, this ain't
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
I imagine there's lots of idle time too. And, just the energy of those 2 hours or 1 hour on stage do not make up for all the rest of the waiting time, right?
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
that's when people get in trouble,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the bands in the earlier days, became serious drug addicts because they just had too much time on their hands, And
Yeah.
I worked with them, and I was trying to keep them out of trouble and try to keep them out of jail, and keep them
Yeah.
alive, you know. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and I've lost 3 or 4 friends, on the road from dying of drug overdoses and stuff like that, which is really sad. It's hard. It's a hard life, and you either need to love it or leave it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. 100%.
It's not
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah. And I know that the scope of what a tour manager does would be enough to fill a full hour of interview, but in general, what are the main responsibilities?
Well, you know what? With every band, it's kind of different
Mm.
because, you know, like when you work with the bigger bands, there's production assistants that'll do part of the job. There's, the production manager who takes care of everything that goes on with the stage and, getting the gear from point A to point B. So, excuse me. So, like in my capacity now, I basically just take care of the band. I get the band from point A to point B, and you know, just kind of look after them. Excuse me.
Right.
And I book all the hotels with a travel agent. I book all the flights. I take care of all the transportation type stuff. And but the production manager does everything that has to do with what goes on stage. All my
Okay.
stuff is backstage. I deal with the interviewers, I deal with the record labels, the booking agents, that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. Besides, dealing with the band and all their problems and all their needs, and so
Right. Right.
I
And
said I'm like a professional babysitter.
a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Well, reading those stories, I mean, people going missing halfway through the tour, replacing a member on a break between tour legs. A lot of weird stuff happens on the road and off the road too, right? With the band.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that
Yeah.
happens all the time. Probably happening right now as we're speaking. There's somebody just left the tour and didn't tell anybody,
Yeah.
or the drummer and the guitar player are fighting, and one of them's going to quit tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And well, Cherry Thieves, they're at the very early stages of fame. In your mind, having lived with bands at that stage, what is for you the sign that they finally made it? Is it a record deal or the first headlining tour, or what's the make or break scenario in that case?
well, you got to remember the book takes place in 1985, so it's
Yeah,
way different than it is nowadays. There's no internet, there's no cell phones, there's no video cameras. You couldn't
yeah.
make your own video with your cell phone.
Mhm.
Back then you actually had to hire a camera crew, or you know or buy a camera to make a video. I mean, it's way different than now.
Mhm.
Anyways, back then getting a record deal was what everybody wanted. Nowadays you can put it out yourself, and it might be as successful as the record label was. But back then it was all about getting a record deal, and just if you sold 1 million records, then life was grand.
Yeah,
That was always the goal.
yeah. And
So
maybe being on MTV as well, right?
yeah, when
85.
MTV came along, then that was getting a record deal, getting on MTV, getting on a tour. those were all the steps and the goals of, every band, no matter what
Yeah.
kind of music you played,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And another fun story that I saw is, well, two stories actually. Issues with the Border Patrol and coming into Canada, where I am,
oh, here again.
with the check, and also a tour bus breaking down the middle of the road. Two like daunting scenarios as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The whole check thing was just really bizarre because we'd already gone in, got our passports stamped. We were on the bus and getting ready to pull away. And all of a sudden,
Mm.
some guy's banging on the door, and the driver's like, "Hey, Rick, there's somebody at the door." So I
Yeah.
opened the door, and, next thing I know, I'm inside getting arrested,
Jesus.
And
Yeah.
here's the funny part. I don't know if I put this in the book or not,
Mm.
but they kept saying that I was smuggling. Did I say that in the book? I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
you
I
do.
don't
You
remember.
do.
And
Yeah.
I got really like upset with them. And I was like, listen, I didn't have the check stuck up my ass. All right.
Yeah. It's in the bag.
It's
It's
in the
open.
bag that I
Yeah.
gave you. You were looking at it. So stop using the word smuggling,
Yeah.
And they all
Yeah.
looked at me and they never said smuggling again. Because they could tell I was
Yeah.
getting pissed. But they just wanted money. That's all it was. It was just, a money grab, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and back then everybody was looking for drugs, pot and whatnot. But now, Canada doesn't care about pot anymore. So
Yeah.
that's not an issue anymore.
Yeah.
Makes it a little easier. When you come back in the States, it's still a problem, but they
Yeah.
don't even check the buses. I mean, the last 3 times I've been there over the last couple of years, they don't even check the bus.
Easy. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Way easier. So,
Yeah.
but
And I know you work with Dream Theater, Great White, Johnny Winter, Peter Frampton, Asia Winger, and many more. Who would
mhm.
you say was the easiest and the hardest to work with, if you can say that?
um, I don't know. I mean, easiest, you know what? Most bands are just nice people. You know what I mean? A lot of them are happy to be there. They're
Hmm.
happy to have the success. They're happy, the newer bands are just happy to, get out of the clubs and go play arenas or go play a theater.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of happiness there. The the ugliness gets to be when they're really successful and they start fighting about money and start fighting about, stupid stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just it gets really stupid. I mean, there's no better word than stupid because these people have more money than they'll ever spend. They're in the nicest airplanes or the nicest buses that money can buy. They're staying in the nicest hotels you could possibly stay in. They're selling out arenas, and yet they bitch all the time
Yeah.
about the
Make
stupid stuff.
anything is an issue, right? Anything and
Yeah,
everything is an issue. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, my computer is not perfect on this, on my desk. So I'm gonna make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's really crazy. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
anybody, I mean, me or you or anybody watching this, if we had the money that they had,
Oh,
I
geez.
would be so respectful and thankful, and but
Yeah.
some people just, I don't know
Yeah.
what the mindset is.
Yeah. Some of them are grateful. I mean, just from interviewing and talking to them, I can sense that they are grateful for
Yeah,
what
I'm
they
not
have.
saying
But yeah.
all. I'm just
Yeah.
saying there are the few that that I've worked with that are
Stand
just,
out. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, wow, really?
Yeah.
So, but I was really nervous about Robert Plant, and
Mm.
because you know in the U.S., I mean, he's a rock god. You know what I mean? You don't get
Yeah.
any higher than Robert Plant.
Yeah.
And so I was really nervous. I was like, is this guy going to be one of those guys that I'm not going to get along with? He's going to be completely fussy about everything. And
Yeah.
so I was really nervous going into it. But as soon as I met him, and after a couple of days, it was just like, he was the nicest guy, most down to earth, would talk to anybody. Just, you know, you would never know he is who he is. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. Well,
that's
I
just
have a
an example
funny
of,
story. Yeah. I have a funny story about that because I had done I think my first face-to-face interview with a musician. And then Robert Plant was coming to Toronto, and I tried to get an interview with him, and they said no. I was like, how dare he? But like, little did I know how the hierarchy moves in these in
yeah.
booking these interviews, But yeah,
It,
yeah,
but
Yeah.
he was, he would sign autographs for fans, and
Mhm.
I mean, he was great. Like,
Yeah.
there was nothing, there was nothing uppity about him. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
He seemed very humble and very happy to be where he is, and you know, and
Yeah.
treated people that way. I've heard people say, "Oh, he was a jerk." Well, what did you do to him to make him be a jerk to you?
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes it's not the artist himself, it's the people around him that are jerks too.
Right, right, right. Well, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even
Yeah.
when my job, I might, go talk to an artist and say, "Hey, Joel's here. You did an interview with him. He wants to say hi," and they'll say no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then I have to be the jerk that goes and tells Joel no.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Eh,
I mean, I doubt Peter Frampton even remembers this story, but when I was working with Johnny Winter, 100 years ago,
mm,
um, we were in Sweden, and Peter Frampton had come to the show, and he had asked security to come and get someone, and because he wanted to say hi to Johnny. And so I went out and I talked to him for a second, and he said, "I'd love to get up and jam with Johnny. My guitar's in the car. If you want me to come, I'll go do it. Blah blah blah." Anyways, so I go in and I go, "Johnny, Peter Frampton's here, and he'd like to say hi, and he'd love to get up on stage and jam with you." And
yeah.
Johnny's blind, basically, so he's always looking down. So he kind of looks up and he goes, "Nobody gets on my stage. I don't give a shit. Jesus Christ is here. Nobody gets on my stage."
Jesus.
I was like, okay, now I got
Yeah.
to tell Peter Frampton that no.
He can't come. Yeah. Jesus.
And that was a long time ago. That was back like when Frampton Comes Alive was, big record.
Wow.
Like he was,
He was huge still,
yeah, he
or
was,
becoming huge. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he at that, that Frampton Comes Alive album in the United States, if you didn't own a copy of it, then you got arrested. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
everybody owned that record.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I get stuck doing things like that, where it's
Yeah.
really uncomfortable, but I have to come somehow make it uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough. Yeah.
yeah.
And well, not sure if you remember him, but I'm friends with Scott Hansen, otherwise
Oh
known
yeah,
as Setlist Scotty.
that
Yeah.
was Scotty. Yeah.
He's probably the biggest Dream Theater fan I know. He told me to say hi and ask what is the best and worst opening act that Dream Theater worked with and why, if you can
Oh,
name one.
I can't name one.
Okay.
Best. I mean, we've had a lot of great bands open for us, like Opeth and Devin Townsend, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a bunch because it's been, so many years.
Yeah.
I can't even remember them all. But as far as the worst, there wasn't really any worst. They were all, a lot of them were younger, newer bands, and they were happy to be there and, respectful and stuff. And but no, I can't really think of anybody.
Fair enough. Well,
There was nobody that I kicked off the tour. You know what I mean?
right,
If they
right.
were jerks, they would have been gone.
Yeah, yeah. I saw Big Elf opening for them in 2010, I think, in
Yeah, I
Brazil.
love that band.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were awesome.
yeah. I don't know what happened to them. They just didn't, they didn't click, I guess, for some
Yeah,
reason. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They were great guys. They were a lot of
yeah.
fun.
And I read an interview Scott did with you, and you mentioned that none of your kids wants anything to do with music. Knowing what you know about this business, is it a relief for you or a source of frustration?
No, definitely, a relief, to be honest with
Okay, okay,
you. No, we did everything we could to, keep them away from it. But
right.
no, they all grew up going to shows and going backstage, so they got to see a lot of it in their younger day. So they didn't,
That's probably why they don't want to have
yeah,
anything to do with it.
yeah, and they listened to
Yeah.
me bitch about it at home, at the dinner table and stuff. So
Right.
my my son, my one son is really into music, and he does some DJing stuff and things like that. But he doesn't have any aspirations of being in the music business. And the other two,
Okay.
you know, love music and still go to see their favorite concerts. But it's just
Yeah.
just
Not as work.
just
Yeah.
what I do. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
All right. All right. And well, famously, Noah Monk went from being Van Halen's tour manager to being the actual like career manager, right? The
Right.
band manager. Is that a move you ever considered?
No, never.
No.
No. No, a manager and a tour manager are two different beasts, in my mind.
Right.
I honestly believe that nobody should hire a manager unless he or she was a tour manager for at least 1 year.
Right.
I mean, so they actually
Mhm.
see what goes on the road. Because I've worked with managers, they have no idea what's going on. One of them called me up and said, "We got a job, we got an offer to play a shed, and I don't. What's a shed?" And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And then another one said, "So the booking agent's telling me about something about time zones." And I'm like, "Yeah." Well, they said that because of the time zone, we can't do this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't know what time zones are?
Wow.
So,
That is
you know,
crazy.
yeah. So that, I mean, there's some great managers out there, and there's some that just have no business being a manager.
Yeah.
They have no idea what's going on, or some of them are just looking at numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not looking at, how do we make this happen for this amount of money? They just say, well, that's not going to happen because we don't have the money. Well,
Right.
it's got to happen, or we're not going to get there, or the show's not going to happen. So, sometimes it's like pulling teeth, with some of these people who just don't have the experience, or they used to work for a record label, which has nothing to do with touring and nothing to do with, you know, managing a band. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
they might know what not to do and what to do with the record label, but they don't know what to do and not to do with promoters and venues and the bus
Yeah.
companies, the truck companies, the sound companies, the lighting companies, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
You know,
Different beast. Yeah.
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 So it's a totally different beast.
Yeah.
And plus, I like traveling. I've been traveling my whole life. I don't want to just sit behind a desk all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Fair enough.
that's
Yeah.
why I say it's two different beasts.
Yeah.
So,
And well, you're gearing up for the tour with Dream Theater, Devin Townsend, Animals as leaders. Dream Sonic, that's kind of their new brand, a new
right.
festival that's supposed to be like a yearly thing or a recurring thing. What can the fans expect if you can disclose anything about this tour?
Just some great music. I mean, the whole John's idea and the rest of the band's idea is to try to do this every summer,
Okay.
because we do all the festivals in Europe and Asia and all over the South America.
Yeah.
Tons of festivals. How many festivals have we done in the US? Zero.
Zero. Yeah.
you know
Yeah. So you
so
created your own. Yeah.
so we're created our own,
Yeah.
and so this is gonna be the first time we've done it, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be fun. We're playing a lot of nice venues, and everybody's excited, and like I said, great music. I love both of those bands, and so does all the Dream Theater guys.
Yeah.
And we toured with Devin already, so we're already friends, and
Yeah.
so
Sure. Yeah. And I spoke with Jordan a few months ago when he was doing his solo tour. And we spoke about the diminishing length of the shows because we used to have an evening width, but now not so much anymore because they
yeah.
have opening acts. I guess that will be the trend moving forward for Dream Theater as the band gets older and playing shorter sets seems to be the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, there's two ways of looking at it. They're getting older, and 3 hours of nonstop
Gruesome.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
playing is rough on the body. People don't
Yeah.
think about it, but there's a couple older guitar players that are actually starting to retire because they have arthritis in their hands. I know
Mhm.
Keith Emerson, before he passed away, had arthritis in his hands and he could
Yeah.
barely play. so yeah, when you get older, I mean, there's nothing you could do about it. Your body starts to change, and doesn't always keep up with the 20-year-old kid you used to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you know I don't know. And then there's always the leave them wanting more idea.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You're not burning them out.
Yeah.
They'll come back again if you only play if you play a shorter set.
Yeah.
But it's hard on the opening acts. Excuse me, because a lot of the Dream Theater fans do not want to see an opening act. They just come to the Dream Theater, and they've made it very clear, we don't
Yeah.
care about your opening acts.
Yeah.
So that's been hard,
Hmm.
And I know the Dream Theater guys, they love music more than anybody else. So they're happy to get, different bands on the tours with them so they can actually see him and become friends with them. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so.
Pretty cool. Yeah. And then, so last question for me, we have, only 90 seconds, but seeing Mike Portnoy reconnect with the guys, I mean, is there any talks or any chance or anything going on about eventually doing one show or a reunion tour with him or anything like that?
No,
No?
nothing. No, I mean, John, used him on the solo tour just because he wanted to keep his solo tour separate from Dream Theater.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he didn't want to use Mike Mangini,
Mike.
he
Yeah.
didn't want to use, John Mayung,
Yeah.
to do it. So he wants to keep it separate. And it was
Yeah.
great. It was a great tour,
Yeah.
We had some great shows on that tour. And the band was great. I mean, Dave LaRue and Mike Portnoy, they were great.
Yeah.
So no, there's nothing in the works. Dream
Fair
Theater
enough.
take some time off and then do a new album and then another tour. And,
Yeah.
But
Fair enough. Okay. And there you have it, guys. Rick Feulner's book, Stars Don't Carry Their Own Baggage, is available for purchase on the link showing on the screen right now. Go ahead and give it a try, and I'm sure you enjoy it as much as we did. Also, give us your comments about the interview, about the book, about Dream Theater's upcoming tour. We'd love to hear your thoughts. For the latest news, reviews, interviews, and concert reviews, make sure to follow Brave Words and Sonic Perspectives websites and social media sites. I'm your frequent blabber, Rodrigo Altaf, and I'll see you on another interview very soon. Take care and rock on.